Good morning, everyone. Oh. Oh. One more. Let's do one more. Thanks for bearing with us. We're just doing a quick photograph for social media. So before we actually start, and for those of you who are joining us via the webcast live, this is an interactive discussion. So we do want you to share your comments and your questions with us. We're working on 2 social media platforms, both Twitter and Facebook. So you can call us out on both of those platforms, or you can use the hashtags DPINGO or Day of Families to put in your comments if you have a comment about what's being said or a specific question. Even if you're in the room and you're maybe too shy to raise your hand, you can use those platforms to raise your questions or just the issues that you would like to be raised or addressed, or if you'd like to react to something that's been said. So good morning to everyone. My name is Jeff Brez. I'm the Chief of NGO Relations, Advocacy and Special Events in the Department of Public Information. We're thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining us this morning. For our today's DPI, non-governmental and not-for-profit organizations briefing. We're proud to partner for this briefing with the Division for Social Policy and Development at the UN's Department of Economic and Social Affairs, what we call DESA here at the United Nations. And today's briefing is titled Families, Education, and Well-Being. Here at the UN, we believe that families and family-oriented policies and programs are vital for the achievement of many goals and targets of the Sustainable Development Agenda, but particularly Sustainable Development Goal 4. Who knows which goal is number 4? Who knows about the Sustainable Development Goals? How many are there? 17. Okay, and Goal 4 is the goal for education. Okay, and so this topic, I think, is particularly for us linked to the aim of Goal 4, which is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. This briefing is being held in observance of the International Day of Families, which was actually 2 days ago, but obviously it continues, and we're happy to have you all here with the focus this year on raising awareness of the role of families in promoting early childhood education and lifelong learning opportunities for children and youth. So before we get into the briefing, I just also wanted to let you know that we are going to end this briefing at 12:45 promptly so that you have time to get to the UN bookshop, where at 1 o'clock there will be a launch of a book called A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea by Melissa Fleming, who has many, many years of experience at the UN's Refugee Agency as the Director of Communications. A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea embodies the reality of refugees who risk everything in search of safety. They're risking safety and their lives in search of long-term safety. I urge you, if you can, to attend the event and meet Melissa Fleming, who so articulately describes what we now see, sadly, unfolding before us as perhaps the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Mr. Alberto Padova, the Chief of the Social Integration Branch at the Division for Social Policy and Development in DESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Mr. Padova.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and join Jeff, welcoming you all to this briefing. Let me start by thanking DPI colleagues for making this event possible in collaboration with us in DESA. So we gather here today to celebrate the International Day of Families. It is an annual tradition here at the UN in New York, which is also a tradition in many countries of the world. The purpose of the International Day of Families is to raise awareness of the role of families in different aspects of development, a role that is sometimes overlooked or taken for granted. To put it plainly, we will not be able to realize the very ambitious agenda for sustainable development we have embarked on without the full engagement of families all around the world. Families can contribute to the achievement of many development goals and we should recognize and harness their potential to do so. That is why, in recent years, the International Day observances focused on several goals and the role of families in helping to achieve them. In 2015, we focused on SDG 5, gender equality, while last year our focus was on SDG 3, good health. This year we want to recognize the role of families in the achievement of SDG 4, quality education. Families are at the center of the social life of communities everywhere. They ensure the well-being of their members, they care for the young and the old. Importantly, families educate and socialize children and youth, and we all know that education starts at home. In fact, the role of parents and sometimes grandparents as first educators cannot be overemphasized. Early childhood education and development is absolutely vital for future prospects in life of every person. Supportive and stimulating family environments ensure a good start in life at an early age. Later on, parental roles are crucial as well, as it is parents and caregivers who encourage, nurture, and support youth learning opportunities. Families have a great potential to educate for peace and sustainable development as well. They can teach tolerance and understanding. They can encourage strong intergenerational relations and solidarity. Indeed, we can and should expect all that from families. But we should not forget that we also need good policies to support families in the fulfillment of those expectations. We need strategies ensuring work-family balance in the workplace so that mothers and fathers can be productive employees and involved parents. We need policies that support parental education and lifelong learning. In short, we truly need public policies that recognize the vital contribution of families to development and support them in fulfilling this important role. We count on governments, civil society, and the private sector to assist families in ensuring good education and lifelong learning opportunities for their family members. Ladies and gentlemen, let us celebrate families and their contribution to development. Let us applaud them on their tireless efforts to ensure that their children and youth are well educated and become good citizens of the world. And let us commit to empowering families to support the implementation of Agenda 2030 for the benefits of individuals, families, communities, and societies around the world. Happy International Day of Families to all of you and your families. Thank you. Let me now turn the mic to our moderator, Isuna Dugarova, Policy Specialist at UNDP.
Thank you, Jeff and Alberto, for welcoming remarks. It's an honor to be here to moderate this event and to celebrate the International Day of Families. My name is Isuna Dugarova. I work at UNDP specializing on family and social policies and broader issues of sustainable development. This year's observance of the International Day focuses on Sustainable Development Goal number 4, as Jeff mentioned, which is ensuring quality education and promote lifelong opportunities for all. Today, we would like to focus on the role of families in helping to achieve this goal. As you may know, this role is sometimes overlooked, and yet is absolutely critical to achieving overall well-being of family members. We will emphasize several aspects of education today, starting with early childhood education that will be presented by UNICEF. We will then address work-life balance, care work, as well as corporate responsibility. We will then look into parental education and the role of civil society in this area. And finally, we will hear about the impact of media on children's development. All these topics are very important, not just from academic and policy perspective, but we would also like to address the concerns of parents themselves and highlight how important they are in educating children and having overall achieving overall development outcomes for them. So the presentation will be followed by question and answer session where we hope to hear your comments and address your questions. In the interest of time, I would like to briefly introduce the speakers of the panel, which consists of UN agencies, academia, civil society, and media. So our first speaker is Mr. Eduardo Garcia Roland, who is a UNICEF Early Childhood Development Specialist focusing on emergencies and strengthening families around the world. He's a humanitarian worker with extensive experience working on child soldiers, children's integration into families, psychosocial support, and other issues. Mr. Roland, we are very happy to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do I have to press something? Oh. Thanks. What a pleasure to be here with all of you celebrating the International Day of the Family. So thank you very much for being there with us in this big room and also online. It is my pleasure to talk about education in relation to early childhood development. And just to frame a little bit what we are talking about, early childhood development refers to the development of the youngest children, basically up to the age of going to school. And I will say that we can distinguish that between two ranges of age, if I can say, since inception, basically, to the age of 3, the youngest ones, and then from 3 to 5, from 3 to the age of going to school, which usually is when you put kids in preschool. And until a few years ago, early childhood development in relation to education was very much focusing on those years when children are in preschool. But today I want to talk to you a little bit more about the previous years of learning, 0 to 3, which are probably the most dramatic years of learning in our history as human beings, in our individual personal history. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about why is that important today. What is learning, particularly in those first 1,000 years of life? So we can say that in early childhood development, we have the first 1,000 years of life and the second 1,000 years of life. And then, which is the situation and response of kids, of children, the youngest children in the world, very, very rapidly, to give a space for interacting, questions and answers, and any kind of dialogue that probably you are more interested in. Let's go ahead. Next. There is a historic moment in time, and both Jeff and Alberto have mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, and that this event today is focusing on the Sustainable Development Goal 4. Next slide. If we see history with the big picture of history, we'll say that there are big steps in humanity. Before we were in the Millennium Development Goals, and to them we were talking about reducing child mortality. I have to give you good news. It's not only bad news in the newspapers. There are very good news that sometimes get lost in the big mess of that we are living today. In the last 20 years, when I said the big mess, you know what I am talking about. In the last 20 years, we have reduced child mortality enormously. So those Millennial Development Goals have been very, very close to be achieved. Well, there are a lot of business to be not completed. But for example, we have reduced child mortality from 20 million children, 20 million deaths of under 5s due to preventable diseases, to around 5 million. I mean, you can say, oh my God, there are still 5 million kids that are dying from preventable diseases. But if you see this in historic perspective, the trend is fantastic. So now children are surviving. But what are we doing with those children? What about thriving, right? We don't want children to survive. We want our animals and pets to survive. We want our children to thrive. We want societies to thrive. Next slide. I want to show you a little video just because I like it, but also because it illustrates how we learned and what the dangers of not learning in the very first years of life. Please.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Okay, thanks. Next slide. Oops. Yeah. It's very nice to bring children at the table, and then they speak much better than I do, clearly. And I think that is much more, articulate than anything that I can say on the importance and how we learn when we are in our very early years of life and our early days of life, where the synaptical connectivity in our brain, if you allow me just a little bit of a obnoxious term, it's increasingly exponentially since the moment we are born, to the point that from moment 0 to moment 3 years of age, your connections, your electric connections in your brain are going to increase humongously, to the point that it's going to be 10 times the connections in the whole internet of today, from 0 to 3. Anyways, so we know now that there is a huge connection. Just a couple of messages. There is a big connection between your genetic imprint and your environment. So it's important what, kids will say, like, we want our kids to be smart and happy and healthy. Well, there is a potential to be smart and happy and healthy, but the environments we know today, that they determine very much how that is going, that genetic imprint can really explode, basically, how can really become a reality in a human being. And the family is key, because the connections with the families are going to support those environments. If they are going to be a nurturing care, they're going to be conducive environments for development and learning, or not. Next slide. The brain is an amazing organ. It's just a little bit over a kilogram in our head, but determines who we are. But to develop that brain, the most important period of time, believe it or not, is not university. It's not secondary school. It's not primary school. It's not even kindergarten. It's even earlier than that, when we really set the learning and the structures on our brain to learn. Next slide. The time matters. The earlier, the better. If you see that in this slide, there are scanners of brains of children who have been subjected to abuse and neglect, actually, from an institution, and children who haven't, who have been growing up in a nurturing environment, in a good environment. Actually, I use the plural, but that's singular. So the red represents neuronal activity within the brain. Children who have been subjected to abuse or neglect, lack of stimulation, lack of learning opportunities in the youngest earliest years of life are really very much falling behind. And it's very difficult for them to recover. I'm not determinist. Definitely there are opportunities, and the brain is amazing, and the human beings, we can recover from many things, but the starting point will be very, very difficult to recover from. While if someone has been subjected to abuse and neglect in later years of life, the opportunities to recover is much higher. Next slide. The plasticity of the brain, which basically is the capacity to learn, is bigger in the first years of life. Actually, it reduces really very significantly after 3-5 years. We can always learn, and we always learn, and hopefully we all are continue learning, but it's more, we have to put much more effort to learn after the first years of life. Next slide. The environments in families that will allow to have a good development and having opportunities to develop are those where there is love, connection, and stimulation. You saw the video. We can have positive stress. I mean, 1 minute of not attention could be even positive and develop some skills in the younger kids. It can be tolerable, but also it can be toxic, and it can be very damaging on neuronal development and development in general. Next slide. That's to show you just a couple of other pictures also on how it affects the negative environments and the lack of family, in fact, in the development of a brain, with very much less brain activity for children who are very young when they have been subjected to abuse or neglect. In fact, there are interesting studies in this country on different families that are supportive to kids and those who are less supportive to kids. By the year 3, children from some families with low rates of literacy and low levels of income, etc., were stimulating kids much less. And in fact, by age 3, children from other kind of families who have higher rates of literacy in the family and better income in the family were listening to 30 million words more than those who were coming from lower families with lower literacy, etc. Next slide. Next slide. I just wanted to show you this representing what we are today. Before, there were a lot of kids who didn't make it to year 5. The child mortality was huge, and as I said, only 20 years ago there was 20 million children around the world. Today is lower. We still have to work on it. There are 5 million children around the world that died from preventable diseases, but there is still 240 million children who are at risk of not being developmentally on track, which is basically the indicator on the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal 4.2. We need to reach out to those ones, and we need to help families to be able to help those kids to better, to produce or to create these environments that are conducive for learning. Next slide. Next slide. We are increasing also the kindergartens and preschool for kids. We have to increase that much more for the second 1,000 days of life, and we have to increase, obviously, quality of it, which we are working a lot on that, and we are now becoming with better standards and more training and more capacity building for those educators in those settings. But we still have a lot of work to do in that area to achieve those development goals. Next. To do so, we need intersectorial programs helping parents to have for their kids to have better health, better nutrition, more stimulation, and more learning. And next, because I don't want to talk too much, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowland, for this absolutely fascinating presentation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, is Ms. Patricia W. She's the director of the Research Center for Work and Family Balance at IAE Business School of Austral University in Argentina. Her areas of specialization include business ethics, corporate social responsibility, work and family, and women leadership. Ms. W., please go ahead.
Thank you. It is a great honor for me to be here today to share with you my passion for supporting corporations for the well-being of the employees' families. Thank you, Renata Kamarska, for your invitation to participate in this panel. On this International Day of Families, we will focus on what we celebrate, the family. The family as the wealth of nations, the family as the cornerstone of our social capital, and in connection with Objective 4 of SDGs, the family as the cradle for the education of children and young people all over the world. Sustainable societies need cohesive and inclusive families, which is enhanced environment, enriched through education, can foster the full development of the capacities and rights of children and young people. It is in the family that we learn the meaning of our existence. It is within the family that principal values and rules of coexistence are learned. In the context of the home, every situation becomes a vivid, vital learning experience. For this to become true, time becomes a priority. But unfortunately, the daily pressure of modern life, economic needs, and the tensions in the working place drain our energies and consume our time, and it is imperative that we become aware of these situations. For example, as human beings, it has taken us a long time to become aware of the damages associated with climate change. It has not been still recently that most of the countries all over the world had been sensitized and now are involved in the care of nature and in the respect of the environment ecology. It is in this respect that I would like to address here that there is still a much more subtle but not less damaging contamination, which is the contamination of human ecology. In fact, an inappropriate approach to modern life impacts on the well-being of people, affecting the fundamental core of human being, which is the family. Long working hours, lack of flexibility to attend to family demands, damage the quality of life. Its effects are seen first in the working place, then in the physical and mental health of people, and sooner than later, it affects the family as a whole. Parents have less energy and less time to take care of children, the older person, and the sick. Thus, this context pollutes human ecology, the natural habitat we, human beings, need to grow, develop, and enrich our whole well-being along the different stages in our life. What could we do to take care of this human ecology that guarantees our well-being? Next slide, please. Next. The answer of these challenges requires shared responsibilities. First of all, when an individual decided to start a family, he or she should be aware that there are inexorable responsibilities, as for example, to decide how to raise the children, which implies who will take care of them, how much time to spend with them, and also how to organize the home, considering, for example, the time to do the chores. Next, please. In many instances, people are not fully aware how the condition of modern life impacts and affects the family. This is why, in partnership with Home Renaissance Foundation from the United Kingdom and the Culture, Work and Care Center of INALDE Business School of Colombia, represented here by its director, Dr. Sandra Hidrobo, we have decided from the Center of Family and Work Balance from the IAE Business School of Austral University of Argentina to carry out a pioneering work research with the goal to measure daily tasks in process of raising the family, the time allotted to them, how these responsibilities are shared within the home, how these values are passed on to children, and how they are compatible with an intensive job outside the home. Our study started in 2015 with interview of 50 experts from 37 countries. This research allowed us to identify the common denominators in different cultures, and based on this, we designed a quantitative survey called Global Home Index. Next, please. This digital survey was especially designed by Dr. Belén Mesurado, who is here with us. The questionnaire was carried out through a web page available in several languages. To obtain more information about this survey and optimize participant involvement through the web page, once their survey is completed, each participant receives a report about his present situation with a series of positive suggestions about how to improve their family life. Next, please. Now, I would like to share with you the main conclusion of the first report, a comparative study in 20 countries, through the following video. Next, please. Another actor for the care of human ecology is the state. Within the series of initiatives started in Argentina to promote this responsibility in the public sector, I would like briefly to share with you a program called Family Spaces, developed for the Family Development Agency of the City of Buenos Aires. This initiative offers a free professional counseling not only to prevent family problems, but also to strengthen the family bonds and their impact on social relationships. In this sense, we are also helping to promote to the new urban agenda that fosters friendly cities for families who want to improve social and intergenerational relationships. We also try to help parents to develop parental skills, neglected topic. This point is directly connected to the achievement of SDG 4. Next, please. Finally, we need to talk about corporate responsibility for the care of human ecology, fulfilling the demands of their employees. We understand that the families of employees are the new corporate stakeholders. So this is why, since 2009, at the Center of Family Work Balance at the IAE Business School that I direct, we are determined to help families from the working place. We have established the concept of family corporate responsibility in Argentina, and from there we have introduced it to most other countries in the region. This concept refers to the effect that corporate policies can have on human ecology care and the well-being of these people. Next, please. We are proud to say that in Argentina, the number of corporations that have started their journey and that are actively involved in this culture change is significantly growing. In 2010, we created a network of corporations that support the integration of family and work, and their efforts have resulted in the publication of 4 guides of good practices. I would like to share with you 3 initiatives. Next, please. First of all, Walmart Argentina has more than 12,000 employees working in 20 provinces. It offers their male employees who have become parents an 8-day paternity leave, which goes beyond the leave established by law. They also offer the possibility to work 6 hours a day without salary reduction during the first month of the life of the newborn. Next, please. Second, Roche, a chemical lab, offers a program called First Working Experience for their employees' young children. Its goal is to help young people to acquire the necessary basic skill and competence to answer the demands of the present job market. This program also wants the active participation of the family in organizational context and foster the intergenerational exchanges where everybody learns from everybody else. This program is very helpful considering the present situation where it is difficult for young people to get a job, a great concern for many families today. And third, Telecom, next. A telecommunication corporation has developed a program to help those employees who need to take care of the older person in the family. Telecom offers a counseling gerontology service. Employees can send either by telephone or email their requests, which are answered within 48 hours according to the urgency of the case. This service is free and assures total confidentiality. So the key, next please. The key is to work to set new frontiers with creativity and flexibility between work and family. The challenge is to harmonize these shared responsibilities for the well-being of each individual, each family, and each society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. W., for this insightful presentation. So our next speaker is Mr. Diego Barroso. He's a member of the Management Committee of the International Federation for Family Development. Recently, he has been a project manager for IFD to the European Union FP7 project, Families and Societies, which aims to provide data about the present and future families in Europe with a focus on the most disadvantaged families. Mr. Barroso, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. It is an honor for me to talk to you today. My presentation will have 3 parts. First of all, we will show a video about our activities. Later on, I will talk my speech. And we'll have a second video at the end to show our methodology that we are using to train parents. Let's start with the first video, please.
Children used to be raised by a whole clan. But things change. And your children will start to grow up and have to make their own decisions. Many of us wish that children didn't just arrive safe and sound, but also with an instruction manual, right? Oh. Throughout history, many people have tried to write instruction manuals for raising children, and powerful speeches have been written. But when your child does this, or this, do you look for a solution in a book? Where would you start? Every child is unique. That's why there are no ready-made formulas. You can talk. Find some time to spend together and talk about each child. That's right. The most important thing to do when raising children is to love each other and love your kids. And that means spending a lot of time thinking and talking with each other and with others. Friends can offer a lot of support, and you can offer support to them as well. And imagine if someone with lots of experience, someone who has read a lot of books, offered you an effective method for carrying out these conversations. A professional who could use their own experience and that of many other couples to help you create your own family project. Who could ask for more? The 21st century revolution starts at home.
Okay, well, once we have seen this family enrichment video, let's review some concepts. Parenting, okay, next slide, please. Parenting is the process of promoting and supporting the physical, emotional, social, financial, and intellectual development of a child from infancy to adulthood. Parenting takes a lot of skills and patience and is a constant work and growth. The cognitive potential, social skills, and behavioral functioning a child acquires during the early years are, and we have mentioned before, are fundamentally depend on the quality of their interaction with their parents. This means parents have a unique role that can be replaced. As recognized by several United Nations resolutions, the family has the primary responsibility for nurturing, protection of children, and those children for the full and harmonious development of their personality should grow in a family environment and in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. Next slide. Historically, most of the education was the task of parents and the rest of the family. Before the establishment of a universal and compulsory education, parents were expected to assume full responsibility for the upbringing of their children, including their formal education, which is now the province of the school. As formal education is regulated by the state, and the borders between both worlds is not totally clear, different political systems give different practical competences to each one of them. Next slide. Currently, most men and women aspire to be great parents to their children, but some life circumstances can make this more challenging. Work and family lives are increasingly influencing each other as both women and men engage in earning as well as caring activities, often reinforced by increasing employment instability. While men and women can no longer be said to be living in a separate spheres, the shift in gender roles has been asymmetric. Female labor market participation has been increasing much more than male participation in household and child care. As a result of these uneven changes, women today are often to face a double burden or a second shift. After their paid work hours, they are expected to take the same responsibilities at home too. Next slide. Today, parent education classes and family support initiatives are growing in popularity. many schools establish requirements for parenting family support programs as a component of their services. At present, preventing parent education with classes, presentation, or speeches, or sessions, discussion about real situations based on case method, are also growing in popularity in different countries as a way to help the diversity of families of today, since each family is different from another one. Next slide. Studies of the effectiveness of parenting education show that parent education is highly effective. This is especially true in cases in which parents seek assistance due to a problem that they are experiencing with their children. Parent education has been shown to increase parenting skills, reducing parenting stress, and reduce unwanted behavior in children. Parent education develops a sense that parents are capable, have the information they need to be good, and therefore develop improved confidence in their role as parents. Parent education reduces the incidence of child maltreatment. Parent education assists divorcing parents. Parent education assists single mothers. Parent education assists parents at risk children. In summary, parents have the power to create change. Parents have been seen the most important contributors to bringing about long-term change in children. Next slide. Schools are the obvious centers for the next phase in parents' education, since all parents have some connection with the schools for many years. Relations between home and the school, however, leave much to be desired in most countries. It is, of course, impossible for schools not to have some link with parents. Some critics say that teachers have enough to do educating children. They cannot be expected to educate parents as well. But we think that teachers have something to learn from parents, and that therefore is not a question of parent education, but of cooperation with parents. Next slide. Parents in some countries, especially Northern Europe, benefit from family leave policies that grant them paid time off to care their young children. Labor market regulations that shorten their regular working time throughout their children's lives, and public programs that guarantee access to high-quality substitute care during the hours that they spend on the job. In some countries, most markedly in the US, where child rearing is viewed in exceptionally private terms, parents are largely left to craft market-based solutions to work-family conflicts. We present powerful evidence from empirical research indicating that our three core policies, family leave, working time regulation, and early childhood education and care, do in fact shape parent and child outcomes. We close by demonstrating that in those countries with more generous and more gender egalitarian policy design, on average, parents have more time to spend with their children, mothers and fathers divide paid and unpaid work more equally, and children fare better on crucial outcomes. Next slide. As a conclusion, I want to say, one, parents may need to be more aware of how their interaction with their children influence development. Two, schools are more effective when parents are actively engaged in their children's education. And three, families need support in order to maintain a healthy status. Families may not always be able to create an atmosphere that contributes to healthy families. They may need help from outside of the family to improve their personal skills, communication, in order to have healthy families. And as a recommendation, next slide, we want to place some recommendations to you. The first one is, parent education needs legislative support. Funding sources should be provided for parent education and requirements that parent education and parent involvement programs be included in legislative packages for education. Second, resources need to be made available to families. Parents should seek training in how to better raise and guide their children, need to have resources available to them. This can be done through schools, churches, and other institutions that have an interest on the needs of the family. Number 3, parent education should be part of the every child education. More children will become parents or be involved with their children as adults. Teaching high school students how children develop and helping them develop communication and guidance skills could decrease child abuse and provide more supporting parenting for all children. And finally, family-friendly policies needs to be emphasized. It is important both for private industry and governmental agencies to work together to make sure family-friendly policies are both developed and enforced. And then, as a last point of my presentation, I want to share with you another video talking about the case study methodology, which is the methodology we use to train our courses. Go ahead, please.
Marriage and family life are not mathematical formulas that have only one right answer. Only you and your spouse can work out what's best for your relationship and your family. Family enrichment courses help you form your own ideas and opinions as to what is best for your family. Family enrichment courses are based on the case study method. In many parenting courses, the lecturer does 90% of the talking, whereas with the case study method, the participants do most of the talking. This is what makes it so much more enriching and helpful. How does the case study method work? Step 1. The case will mirror a real-life situation. It will be short. Information is purposely compressed, and the case will read like a novel, which will confront you with the situation, a compelling problem in need of solutions. You are given the case some days prior to the session. You read it and study it on your own. Throw yourself into the case study. Put yourself in the shoes of the protagonist. Good preparation is key to getting the most out of this process. The better you prepare the case, the more enriching and fruitful the course will be for all involved. Step 2. Discuss the case with your spouse, who should also have studied it beforehand. Compare opinions and solutions. Then allow the case to linger in your mind. You may come up with new ideas, insights, and solutions as you go about your daily life. Step 3. Small group discussion. Steps 1 and 2 ensure that you come well prepared to the small group session, which is made up of 5 or 6 couples. This discussion is not more than 1 hour long. Discuss the case with the other couples in your group. Everyone should feel free to give his or her opinion and to share insights in this friendly and safe environment. As you listen to the views of the others, you will probably realize that there are issues you have not dealt with or aspects that have not struck you. Step 4. General session. Having discussed the case in your small group, you will now discuss it further with a larger group, and this time, a professionally trained moderator will facilitate and encourage everyone's contribution. It will be fascinating to see how different groups may have arrived at different solutions and highlighted different aspects of the same case. The case study will challenge and stretch you to take a stand and make decisions as you have to do in real life. The decisions and debates will force you to think widely and deeply and will foster real engagement and friendship with other couples. You will be enriched by the ideas and solutions of many people with diverse backgrounds, personalities, and expertise. It will all happen in a relaxed, friendly, fun, and professional setting. At the end of the session, the moderator will provide a summary and well-researched input on the subject matter of the particular case.
And I want to finalize my speech recognizing and appreciating the work of our about 8,000 volunteers that are working in 66 countries helping the family. Thank you to all of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barroso, for your informative presentation. So our last speaker today is Mr. Michael Robb, who is the Director of Research at Common Sense Media, which provides data on children's use of media and technology and its impact on children's development. Mr. Robb has extensive experience working on the issues involving media and children, early literacy outcomes, and problem-solving abilities. Mr. Robb, we're very glad to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Robb. I am the Director of Research at Common Sense Media. I want to thank you all for having me here today. It's very exciting to get to participate in this panel. I'm here today because we're all trying to navigate this new world of devices and technology, and it's not always easy. I'm going to be giving a high-level view of how media affects children's development and how parents can be involved in supporting their children to maximize positive benefits and minimize negative outcomes. I won't be able to tackle all of the many ways that media touches our lives and our children's lives, but hopefully I'll give you enough information to whet your appetite. Next slide. Let me start by introducing my organization, Common Sense Media. We are an independent, nonprofit organization dedicated to helping children thrive in a world of media and technology. We've made it our mission to help parents, families, and educators figure this world out through our free resources and through working to help frame the dialogue on media use by children and teens today. Next slide. It may not surprise you to learn that kids are using a lot of media today. Children ages 8 and under spend an average of about 2 hours a day with screen media. Tweens, that is children between the ages of 8 to 12, spend roughly 6 hours a day with media. And teenagers between the ages of 13 to 18, about 9 hours a day with media. Parents feel a lot of guilt and anxiety around this, and they worry about their kids' well-being. And parents also feel a really potent combination of guilt, anxiety, and anxiety about how to navigate it all. And by the way, in case you're wondering, parents spend about as much time with media as their teenagers do. We don't want our children to get messed up. We don't want them to get hurt, and we don't want them to get in trouble. Next slide, please. So the question I want to help us to answer today is, how do we use media in balance as a family to find quality content, to set expectations around healthy and appropriate use, and raise media-savvy consumers and creators? Next slide. So let me start by taking about a 10,000-foot view of what we know about how children are affected by media. In terms of learning for young children, what the research shows is that watching developmentally appropriate programming, and I want to emphasize developmentally appropriate, especially that programming with well-specified educational curriculum, is associated with many positive learning outcomes, everything from learning vocabulary, math, even social and emotional skills. We know from research that co-viewing television, that is, watching television with your child or co-playing or co-using technology with your child, has been especially associated with a range of positive outcomes. It really helps to boost the learning. On the negative side, we know that excessive use or the viewing of developmentally inappropriate programming has been linked to a range of negative outcomes, including aggression, conformity to rigid gender roles, problematic views of people of other races, ethnicities, and cultures. We know that background television is an issue. And when I say background television, what I mean is that about half of the children who live in homes in the United States have a TV that is on either most or all of the time, just in the background in their homes. And why is that an issue? Well, having background TV can have a negative impact on the quality and quantity of parent-child interactions. So you can imagine if you have the TV kind of blaring in the background, and it's mostly adult content, that you're not interacting with your child quite as much as you would be if that TV was off. We know that food advertising has been linked to poor food choices and obesity. Next slide. What about older children? Well, much has been said about how young people today are addicted to their devices. Remember, I said that teens spend almost 9 hours a day with media. With all this time that kids are spending with media, lots of people were asking, what are the consequences of that use? Are our kids addicted? Are we addicted? Are we using the word addicted way too loosely? So we did a poll where we polled more than 1,200 parents and teens ages 12 to 18 in the same household to ask about this issue. And you'll see the first thing that stood out to me when we asked this question, do you feel addicted to your mobile device, that about half of teenagers say that they feel addicted to their mobile devices, and about 27% say that their parents say that they feel that they are addicted to their mobile devices. And you'll also see there's actually pretty good agreement between parents and teens in terms of saying, are you addicted or are you not addicted to your device? Now, this doesn't mean that they actually have some diagnosis of technology addiction. Rather, they just felt like they were addicted, and that there's a good agreement between parents and children looking at this. Next slide. So we also embarked on a very substantial research review around technology addiction, which we sometimes call internet addiction. And it turns out this subject is pretty controversial. When we talk about technology addiction, we're talking about a range of excessive and compulsive technology-related behaviors that can result in significant negative outcomes. So things like withdrawing from other activities, really serious problems completing schoolwork, feeling restless or sad when trying to cut down on technology use. But there are a lot of definitions of technology addiction and lots of different ways to measure it. So as a result, we don't really know how many kids are actually addicted to technology. It's not something that's currently recognized in the DSM, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose mental disorders. Often, technology use or excessive technology use coincides with other problems, such as depression or obsessive-compulsive disorder, which makes it trickier to know whether tech use is a symptom or a cause or both. Are there people who have problems, who are compulsively using media in ways that result in significant problems? Absolutely. Is it true that all of our kids are addicted? Probably not. And by the way, if you're looking at this picture of all these children on their devices in front of great artwork, this picture is of a field trip where teens are actually looking up information about that painting. So go ahead, next slide, please. Consider this quote that we got during a focus group. Adults don't get it. They think I'm addicted to technology, but I'm not. I'm addicted to my friends. This is a sentiment also echoed by Dana Boyd, a researcher and author who says, tech has become the primary place where young people can hang out with their peers. Kids want to be on these sites because that's where their friends are. We may not like what kids are doing, but it doesn't mean that it's something that has to be pathologized. We have to ask ourselves to what extent is what they're doing simply a reflection of what's always been typical for adolescence. That is, the need to be connected, the need to be validated by peers. Kids are just operating in a different context, and the rules of conduct have changed. Next slide. It's not all positive. Many of the media habits that kids and adults have developed are pretty bad for us. For example, media multitasking is a real issue. So using multiple screens at the same time, flipping through multiple apps, trying to have a conversation with the person in front of you while you're also, trying to respond to a message on your phone. Many people think of multitasking as a skill, but in reality, a lot of multitasking probably causes more harm than good. For example, it can cause mental fatigue, slowing you down, making you more prone to errors. It's harder to create memories accurately when multitasking. And in fact, studies have shown that people who are heavy multitaskers, that is, people who do this frequently and thus might be more practiced at it, are actually the worst at it. So this is an example of problematic use that takes some effort for us to be able to address. And it even affects those who are around us. In a study of laptop users in a classroom, students who could see people multitasking on other people's devices performed worse on a later test of the material that was being presented during that class. So if Patricia here was multitasking and I was trying to do this presentation, I would definitely be distracted and not be able to give my full attention to you. So at Common Sense, we've started talking a lot more about single tasking as something to aspire to. Doing one thing at a time. It is harder than it looks. Next slide. I've only given you the tip of a very large iceberg. There's much to be said about technology's impact on health outcomes like obesity or sleep quality, or how much of an effect that media violence actually has. And I'm happy to address any of these questions after this talk. But I wanted to end with a suggestion. One of my colleagues in this field, Sonia Livingston, brilliantly suggests that we're looking at media often through the wrong lens. Instead of worrying about every minute of time that our kids are on screens, and since there's no since there's no research that nails down the exact perfect amount of time that children should be allowed to be on screens, we should use a common sense checklist to better understand how kids are doing, right? Basically, if they're using screens as one part of their lives, but they're getting exercise, they're eating well, they're still being social with their friends, they're keeping up with their schoolwork, maybe we don't need to count every single screen minute that they have. Next slide. So how do we get parents involved? So at Common Sense, we help to promote some overall guiding principles that can take some of the worry and headache out of parenting around technology use. Right? First, we advocate that parents use and watch with their children whenever they can. That way, parents can discuss and explain things as they happen and connect it to real-world experiences. Plus, bonus, it's great bonding time. Number two, making sure that you and your partner are on the same page and know your own rules around media and technology use. Right? So, for instance, can your children take the iPad without asking? Right? Is it their device or is it your device? Are there specific times and places that they can use it? Right? Getting on the same page with that is important. Having clear expectations and even rehearsing, especially with little children, right? You can play that game until you hear the timer go off, right? When you hear this sound, you have to flip the cover shut, right? Practicing that and making sure that kids clearly know what the boundaries are. Things like talking about commercials, advertising, and their purpose, helping especially small children play a game to guess what's being sold. That's something that we advocate for. Encouraging creativity and creation and not just consumption of media, getting kids coding and creating so that media experiences are empowering for children. It's never too early to talk about digital citizenship, which, if you're not familiar with that term, is about behaving responsibly online and safely, and what to do if something upsetting happens. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, being a good role model yourself, that is putting down your devices when your kid wants your attention, following your own house rules. Next slide. So in addition, when we try to activate parents, one of our goals is helping parents become more aware of the good stuff. So if you were to go to commonsensemedia.org, you would see that we do ratings and reviews for an array of movies, television shows, apps, and other media and technology products. And we rate them all based on the best available research on what we know about child development so that we can make determinations on what is developmentally appropriate for children of different ages. We look at things like how scary something is or violent, how much sexual content, how much humor, substance abuse, advertising, swearing and language, but also things like learning potential or positive messaging. Additionally, on our site, we have many Q&As to respond to common concerns like, what age should my kid get a cell phone? Or will my child be harmed by video game violence? Next slide. We also promote simple steps that parents can take in the home. So one of our newest initiatives is something called device-free dinner. And this is something because we know that research shows that eating meals as a family can support things like healthier eating habits and improved academic performance, and it reduces problems with behavior and substance abuse, and advocating that, you know, in part of having a good balance of device time and offline time, that meal times are a really great place to connect with families. Next slide. We always conclude our presentations to parents with an empowering message. We don't want parents to walk away being fearful in this world. We want to remind them that you have this. You got this. We tell them, do not forget that we are all in the same boat trying to navigate through the shifting challenges. And in the end, it comes down to basics. There is no one right answer, and you know your child best. Next slide. Oh, thank you. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rope, for this very interesting presentation. So before I open the floor to the questions and comments, I would just like to summarize very briefly the takeaways that I took from these presentations. I think firstly, family and home environment is key to educating children, and this in turn has very important implications for the well-being of society. We all have seen now that there are essential intersectional policies and programs that can support and empower families and parents in particular. And this includes parental leaves and childcare services. And yet what is, I think, most importantly above all is that we all have a responsibility to share. between the state, civil society, the private sector, and within the family. This shared responsibility, I think, is critical to ensuring that our children achieve the well-being that we hope will support them throughout their life. So now I would like to open the floor to the questions, and when you address a question and have a comment, please introduce yourself and keep it brief. We will take 3 questions at a time. I see a gentleman here, the lady over there, and those 2 questions, please.
My name is Bruce Knotts, and I direct the Unitarian Universalist UN office, and I also chair the NGO DPI Executive Committee. And the question I'd like to ask, and I think it's primarily for Mr. Rowland and Mr. Robb, is the idea of preventing the development of racism, misogyny, homophobia, this kind of behavior. We've been working with some platforms like Think Equal and other platforms that emphasize social emotional learning, and doing that at a very early age. Think Equal starts at age 3. After hearing Mr. Rowland, it might even start earlier than that. But yeah, I would like your comments on making sure that as we're educating our children, particularly young children, they're not developing these very destructive patterns.
Yes, the next question, please.
Yes. I am Queen Mother Dr. Deloise Blakely. I'm the Community Mayor of Harlem and the Ambassador of Goodwill to Africa, and representing the young people. Some of them are getting ready to go to Cannes, to the International Film Festival in France. I guess the question that I would ask, that when we're talking about educating our young people, which you're talking about intergenerational engagement, involvement, how would we do that with the different learning styles? Because what do I say to the young people when they say to me, Queen Mother, it's not enough to go to Cannes, but we want to go to the racing in Monaco as well on their trip? How do I interface that with the learning processes with our young people and make them happy and my educating them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we had a couple of more questions out there. Yes, those, please.
My name is Manny Mulyaneda of the Foundation for Health Education and Drug Awareness, Incorporated. Someone said that true education is the harmonious development of the physical, mental, social, and spiritual faculties of man. And these principles should also be adopted not only in school, but also in the home, because parents are the first teachers. Another person said that there are 3 main reasons of juvenile delinquency. One is association. Tell me who's your friend and I'll tell you who you are. Second is television. And the third is lack of spiritual training in the home. In television, we can see some picture of violence, sexual offenses, any form of criminalities are portrayed in the television. What about these small kids who go to the school and shoot people? Where do they learn this? I don't think parents teach this. They got this from social media. And how media affect children development, I am sure that this has a great deal to do with this juvenile delinquency problem. My suggestion, I heard from someone who said that there is need to educate parents. That's good. But I think not only parents, but also movie producers, TV producers, writers, there should be seminars and workshops in order for them to come up with developmental program, character building program. What do you think?
Yes. Thank you. And there was this lady, please, behind. Just final question before we turn to the panel. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Rena Zhu, and I represent the American Association of University Women. So a problem that I see higher education facing today is that many girls choose less ambitious career paths than boys because of societal pressures that they are meant to support a home and support a family. So I wanted to ask the panel what we can do to rectify these societal biases in younger children before they even develop, and how that will provide for better family environments for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eduardo, would you like to start?
Yes. Oh, I'm talking. You can hear? Okay. Yeah. Thanks for those questions. Great questions, all of you. If you don't mind, Bruce, I'm going to address yours, but also Rina's, because I think in a way they are a little bit connected, if you allow me to say so. So, empathy and tolerance starts the moment you are born. We, as human beings, as mammals, we are mammals. And in the evolution of life, the interesting thing is that the way we have been able to conquer and dominate in this planet is through a process of evolution in which being tolerant and helping each other has helped us to succeed. So as human beings, we are born with a tendency to empathy, to connection, and to love. But as I said in my presentation, and as research says, it's not only what is in our genetical imprint, it's also how the environment allows us to develop that genetic imprint, that tendency that we have to empathy, to love, and to tolerance. And as my mentor in parenting support will say, if you are dealing with parents who are not very empathetic, they're not going to realize the needs of kids, and responsiveness is going to be very low. It's going to be very difficult to work with those kind of parents. Yesterday, it was the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, and they chose a very interesting theme for this year. It was the theme of family. And clearly, it's since the moment you're born where your environment is going to allow you to create those important spaces for tolerance. And it's not only for what you say, which is very important, what you say to your kids, but it's also what you do, right? For your modeling. This goes against the famous sentence, do what I do, not what I say. Actually, parents have a huge influence on what they do and what they say. Gender equality and it's essential also since you are born. And if you really want to have young kids, young boys who are going to be respectful to women and then are going to become respectful citizens and respectful men that embrace women as peers, you have to start since the moment you are born. Definitely. Thanks.
Thank you. Diego, would you like to say something? So, and there was a question on the intergenerational involvement on movie producers and gender dimension. Please, would you like to address?
For which question?
On media producers.
Oh, yes, great. So, and if I may, I'm going to address, I think, both questions because they were related. So, to the first question that was asked about the influence of media and the desire to help children resist bias. As I mentioned in my talk, children spend a lot of time with media. Most of that time is still with TV and video content. You may think it's all social media, but it's usually produced content, right? Like TV shows, movies, stuff on YouTube, things like that. So there's a lot of exposure to role models, much of it not positive. It's a little complicated because it's certainly not the case that it's the primary. It's not the primary driver of children's attitudes, but if it reinforces things that they see in the real world, in their homes, in their communities, it can have an amplifying effect on children's development. And those kinds of representations, negative representations in the media, can become internalized at an early age, especially for children who are heavy viewers of media, which is why we really strongly advocate for parents helping to choose developmentally appropriate media. So helping to select media that has positive role models, that has diverse role models that present counter stereotypical messages. And in fact, what we find in the literature is that presenting those counter stereotypical messages to children through media can be an effective intervention in terms of countering some of that bias. And so the question about TV and delinquency, again, it's also goes to a role model question, right? Because so much of the media content is violent. The natural question is how much of that violence is affecting children. This is a really well-studied, although probably not well-studied enough, topic in the media effects world. And what they find is that there seems to be a small but positive relationship between viewing violent media and certain measures of aggression, although they have not definitively linked it to real-world violence. But what I will say is it's not an effect that uniformly affects all children. It's something that really depends on the context of children's lives. So, for example, if you are a child who grows up in a home where you are exposed to violence, right, in your home or your community, you are more likely to be affected by media violence. So it's not the case that we should necessarily assume that all media affects all children equally. But to your greater point, I think it is a fantastic idea for researchers to sit down with showrunners, studio executives, whoever in Hollywood and other places where they create media content to talk about the effects of media on children so they can better integrate that information into the storylines. And in fact, Common Sense does routinely convene panels in Hollywood to discuss research with Hollywood executives and writers and others who have the ability to create content.
Patricia, would you like to say something on gender dimension, how we can transform gender relations within the family?
I think that our objective is to help the corporation to develop the necessary conditions so that employees can assume their family responsibilities without feeling torn apart by their jobs or feel guilty when caring of families not taken into account in the working place. This is our responsibility to help the companies to support the demands of the family responsibilities of employees to be a good parents, a good people.
Now it's time for another round of questions, please. Yes, on intergenerational relations.
Yeah, no, I could answer, try to answer a little bit your question regarding when you're mentioning educational styles and with your children. And in education, there is always a compromise, or there is one typical style, which is the authoritarian style, and the opposite is the permissive style. And in education, we always say it is an art. It's an art. It's not easy. And because in education you have to set some limits with your children, you have to set and you have to tell them what is good, what is bad, and then you have to choose to do this. But also, is your children, you love them, you need to also provide affection, and this is a balance that you have to manage in both cases.
Another round of questions. Please raise your hands, introduce briefly, and please do keep it short. Gentleman over there, and a few questions there, please.
I want to compliment the panel. Your information is so informative, but so important to everybody who grew up in a family and values how children are growing now. I'm curious to know about studies that may have been done in countries around the world about the role of grandparents and the impact on young children, growing children. Mr. Roland, I was so touched by the film of that little girl that I felt like I should run over and pick her up to relieve the stress. But I didn't really see very much about grandparents, but in thinking about what Mr. Robb said about technology, certainly there are plenty of distractions. Parents don't have time in so many countries to spend time with the children to teach them age-old values, family values of kindness and generosity and even manners. And I'm just wondering whether anybody has studied that we can learn from, and how parents can use technology with Skype and WebEx and FaceTime to communicate if they're too far away to visit. But I'm a big advocate of that. I'm Ed Ryan, a member of the NGO Committee on the Family.
For this very important question, please, a few over there. Please, lady behind. Yes.
Hello, Dorothy Prune-Huber, the Ribbon International. I was struck by the parent-child interaction. And when the mother was playing with the child, of course, the child was so responsive. On the other hand, when the mother was not tuned in, the child reacted in what you called ugly mannerisms. Now, it seems to me with the cell phone or the smartphone, with parents and young people spending an inordinate amount of time on the phone, that they are not responsive, that they are not interacting, and that according to your presentation, Mr. Roland, it seems as if this could contribute to ugly or delinquent behavior. Would you please respond to this?
Thank you. And a couple of more questions, please.
Is it working? No, not yet. Yes? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Aslıhan Çakmak, and I represent the Light Millennium. And thank you to the panel for all this valuable information. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the research you provided. Directed to Dr. Robb and Mr. Barroso, my question is about social media usage among young kids and young people. Did your research differentiate between the developed countries and developing countries? If so, can you elaborate on the differences or similarities?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The lady, please, over there. Yes, please, yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Mamkani Diop. I am a doctoral candidate from Moncler State University. I just have a question. Why not look at what is being done elsewhere and is working, as we don't need to reinvent the wheel? What I'm trying to say is, few years back, Hillary Clinton wrote a book titled "It Takes a Village to Raise a Child," which is a proverb that was borrowed from Africa. What I'm trying to say is that when it comes to raising children, when it comes to family values, Africa has it all. Why can't we look at their models, for example, and adopt it, for example, and give them credit? What do you think? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, happily. I didn't know it was going to be such a smart audience, so thank you very much for coming. And very pertinent questions. So if there has been any research on grandparents. So I think I'm going to touch a little bit on the three questions with my answer, because has been a huge research on interaction of mothers with children. And that reveals, and there is quite interesting also work by Kyle Pruitt, who is one of the researchers in Harvard University, on the biases against male figures in the family. Most of the research has been done on the relation mothers to children, okay, mothers to kids. And that brings us to some problems that exist in the academia, in the practitioner world, and including also civil society, UN agencies, etc., which is we don't pay too much attention to the actual reality of families and the good impact that has co-parentality and having mothers and fathers and other members of the family interacting with the children, with the youngest one. So since many years ago, there has been a lot of research on attachment, on the way the kids develop in those early years. So the attachments, this special bonding that the young kid has with one of several adults in the household, is essential to develop. If that doesn't exist, a kid is going to have serious problems of development. That is true that the majority is with the mother, but since the 60s we know that since the work of Michael Reuter, that there is around 30% or a little bit over 30% of children that actually have those bonds, not with the mother, but many of them with the father or with other members of the family, adults in the household. Okay, so that's a little bit too. Those bondings are really on the nuclear family, which is a little bit, the household. It's a little bit dangerous to say that a village can do this and a kid belongs to everyone. There is special bonding and attachment that has to be developed. There is some research also on grandparents and relation with kids, and a lot of it has been done because of the HIV/AIDS epidemics in Africa, and actually in South Africa also, and how many grandparents have become primary caregivers. That is happening also in the West with a lot of women working outside the house. But probably the biggest movement or the biggest situation where this is happening is right now, surprise, surprise, guess, in China. Because there are millions of parents moving to the cities, to urban centers, and leaving the children behind with grandparents that have this very important responsibility of educating their kids in their values, in their improving and enriching empathy, tolerance, etc., etc. Of course, it's essential that the actual caregivers provide that environment that is nurturing to the kids, that they provide the love, the stimulation, the responsiveness, the basic needs, the independence also, and also the structure. I wouldn't say discipline, the structure that a child needs to develop. And I think also Diego has talked a little bit, quite extensively also on these skills and the need of this framework also for children. I would say that's the major thing that has to happen, and we have to look at the reality. Michael said the sentence that I loved is that these shifting challenges in the society we are living, right? And those shifting challenges is technology that comes around, but it's also in the structures of family, in the structures of society that are being transforming our societies from everywhere, from Africa, Europe, and everywhere. I worked many years in Africa, and there also the families are being transformed. And what we need to do is you can resist change, but change is there. What we have to do is to ensure that those grandparents that take care of their kids, or those single mothers, or those whatever structure of the family exists, provides that nurturing environment, that enriching, stimulated environment that is going to help all this incredible learning of the kids, not only from walking and talking and engaging and discovering technology and interacting with others and creating more peaceful and interactive and tolerant societies. Yeah. Excellent questions, all of you. Thank you so much for asking it. I think it's the questions that we all are asking ourselves, to how to educate our kids and make them better, to create better societies. And the answer is the sooner the better.
Thank you, Eduardo. Michael, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you for teeing me up, because those were such great questions, and I have almost answers to everything. So lots of people have concerns about young people, especially children 0 to 3, and screens, right? You know, we're kind of doing this real-time experiment where we give them all tablets and kind of hope for the best. We should be concerned, and we should be doing research on that. I am personally more concerned about the other issue that was hinted at, which is the issue of parents and screens, especially in early childhood. I will give you a little bit of a secret, which is that there's actually not that much research yet on children and especially new technologies, so iPhones, tablets. The research lag takes a very long time. Fortunately, we have well over 100 years of child development research that I can base some of what I'm going to say on. And what we know from that research is that key to healthy child development are warm, supportive interactions with loving caregivers, right? This is what Eduardo was saying. So to the extent that technology and parents with devices, right, being distracted, takes away from those warm, supportive, loving interactions, that's an area where I am genuinely concerned. So let me give you an example, and this isn't specific to 0 to 3. I think this was a study that was done with children who are preschool age, so a little bit older, maybe 4 or 5. It was a small study, so it's something that take with a little bit of a grain of salt. It was observational. It was looking at parents with children in a fast food restaurant. And what they did was basically look to see how much parents were engaged with their screens and how many bids for attention their children were giving them. And what they found was that for the parents who were using their screen while they were sitting down for the meal, their kids were increasingly misbehaved, trying to get their parents attention, and that the parents were then harsher in dealing with those children. Right. So that's just kind of like a small window. It was 40 or 50 kids that they looked at, but maybe indicative of something else that we might see around that area. So yes, what we always talk about is it's not just that that screens are a problem. It's about the parent-child interaction. So I'm going to link this to this gentleman's point over here about grandparents and the role of technology in fostering communication. When they have done research about the effects of using things like video chat and Skype, what they found is that having that contingent interaction over video chat, right? So a grandparent or a parent, or whoever can talk from one end of the screen to a child located a far distance away, can have positive effects in this study specifically on language development. But those interactions were still rich enough that kids were able to learn through those things. So it's not specifically about your question about social emotional development, but it does point to a potential positive use of things like video chat for grandparents who cannot necessarily be geographically in the same location. And last point that I'll make before I turn it over, to the question about promoting values with media, and to the question about parent-child interaction. They recently did a study of a program called Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Some of you may or may not be aware of this. It's a show in the United States that has a social-emotional curriculum, right? Teaching things about how to deal with anger, how to be a good friend, things like that. And, it's one of these situations where, like, just because a kid likes something, let's not take that away from them. Like, lots of kids like to watch this show. And they did a research study that showed that when parents would co-view with their children around this and talk about the topic of the day, whether it was, how do you, if you get mad, they say, when you feel so mad that you want to roar, you take a deep breath and you count to 4, right? That's an example of a kind of message that they would share. When parents were there to enhance that message, right, talk about it with their kids, those kids were really good at understanding. So it was a really wonderful, shared, loving context for them to learn something that had positive social emotional value, but also using media. So I'm less concerned about media, good or bad, but how it's being used. Thank you.
Thank you. Diego, please.
What I want to say is, and we are fully agree that the grandparents has a very nice role in the education in the family. And in fact, in our courses, there is now one that is addressed to grandparents, how they can help parents to educate. And I agree with all you have seen about the richness that the grandchildren they get from grandparents as well. Mm-hmm. And regarding the difference with the social media and between developed countries and undeveloped countries, also as this media is also difficulting the interaction in the family, what we also in some of the courses we have for children over 6 years, we are touching this subject in our courses because this is an issue that is today in our world. And this is
There's one thing, Eunice, we didn't answer from the lady there.
Would you like to respond? Yes.
There was one thing I didn't answer, which it was I really love the fact that you were so touched by that video. Obviously, you were not touched by what I said, but by the video, so that was a little bit disappointing. But this, I understand that. It happens to me also. I am more about the video. That's what in the early childhood development we call, it's a good example of what we call serve and return, which is basically the way we learn, right? You say, wee, and then the mother says, wee. So those very interesting vocabulary, it's actually the basis of our learning, and it's essential in learning. And I'm really happy that you were touched, because that demonstrates that you have empathy, that you are actually feeling what that kid was feeling. So there was one question about delinquency, which also was in the first round of questions were asking, the gentleman was talking about the reasons of delinquency. And actually there has been some studies about the relation with delinquency, or no, I would say people in jail in this country, in a couple of states, in particular in the state of California, the relation of people in jail, living in jail, and early childhood development. And what the studies say is that there were about 50% of those people who live in jail that were that had very poor early childhood development, or they were unfortunate to have not good first years of stimulation and good relationships. So yes, the answer is absolutely. There are a lot of consequences of not having an early stimulation and loving relationship and a nurturing environment, which are not only about mental health. They are also about physical health and problems of from hypertension to higher levels of cancer, in fact, and also obviously social behaviors and problems such as abuse, substance abuse, and criminality. Yes, there is, unfortunately. But that gives us also a good opportunity and a good. We should say that this is a great information to say. Oh, so we do need to provide those environments for kids from the very beginning. And if you are a father or a mother and you think, oh, it's okay, my kid is very small, I will start talking to him and look at the schoolwork when she's a little bit older or he's a little bit older, because now it's these little things that they're not important. They are important. They are more than important. It's much more important than the exams in university, because those are the bases, the building blocks of your whole life, your whole development. When I was doing parenting courses in Liberia, I will ask parents, and you're going to love this, Diego, so when do you start talking to your children? And some people there told me, usually 4 or 5, when they really start talking back, when they start understanding. But I have to tell you, there are some research in France that says that by the age of 2 months, the child understands the structure of the language before they even say any word. And how do they know that? Because if someone comes and talks in a different language, the kid will react differently, like, what is that? Thanks.
So, and on this positive note, I would like to conclude the discussion today. If you have remaining questions or comments, you can address them after the panel. It's been an honor to moderate this panel. Thank you very much to all the questions to the panelists, and I'd like to commend the work that has been done on helping families around the world. We have some publications in the back of the room. Please feel free to take a copy of Global Home Index that Patricia mentioned, as well as policy recommendations of Families and Societies Project. I would like to thank the Division of Social Policy and Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the Department of Public Information Non-Governmental Organizations for organizing this important event and working together with UNICEF, civil society, academia, and media to reflect various perspectives on education and the role of families to help achieve the SDG number 4. Thank you very much again, and have a nice day.